Well, welcome to those of you that are here on Zoom, as well as those of you that are watching this on LinkedIn, Facebook, and other places where we're actually streaming live as well. We have a number of people that are going to be joining us. I keep getting texts. I can't get in. I can't get in. I can't get in. So I'm assuming that those folks will join us in a couple of seconds. And if you'll notice, this is a meeting, not a webinar. And we've done that on purpose so that we can actually have some engagement and some interaction as we have this discussion. This is not going to be the typical, here's 18,000 slides for you to look at as we try to make some sense out of what's going on with this great resignation and the performance that's related to the great resignation. So for those of you that don't know, my name's Steve Lowisz. I'm going to kind of kick us off, and then I'm going to introduce my counterpart in crime today in just a second, and I'll let Anna give you a sense of her background. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Steve Lowisz. I'm the CEO of Qualigence International. I've been in the talent space for going on my 30th year this year. So I've seen the ups and downs of what's happening, as we call it now, with the great resignation. It's not the first time we've actually seen this, at least not in my historical context for what's happening. So a couple of things, again, meeting instead of a webinar. Feel free to pipe up at any time. We don't want it just to be Anna and I having the discussion. The idea is to leave you with some practical things that you're able to take back to your organization to share that you can start doing right away. I'm not going to say it's easy, but there's some things that we could be doing to address what's happening today. If you don't want to just talk over one of us, just raise your hand. You can use the chat if you'd like as well to post a question, your thoughts. Feel free to put yourself on video so we can actually see you and have more of a two-way engaging conversation. Now, retention is what everybody's focusing on right now, given what's going on. But I'm gonna bring up the fact that I think retention and performance of our teams are actually tied. And things like the the remote work and COVID and all of that. I'm just going to kind of let this stew for a second as we start this thing off. I don't think they're the cause of the great resignation. My opinion is, and we'll kind of dissect this a little bit, is that those things like remote work, which are difficult to manage, and we'll talk about how to actually do that, were really the great exaggerator of what was happening prior to the great resignation, prior to COVID, prior to the remote work. There were already issues that we have not dealt with, that leaders were not dealing with appropriately, that now it's come to the forefront because it's become a bigger issue and people are flocking for the hills. They're going somewhere else because they can. So I just want you to stew on that for just a second. And here's what we know. Companies are spending north of $170 billion a year, billion across the globe, on training, on retention, and so on. And that's the best estimate that I've got. Yet it's not working. Now, there's nothing wrong with additional salary and perks and benefits and all these things that I think are important. But I would suggest to you that maybe we're missing something. And we've got to view this idea of the great resignation, of engagement with our teams, retention of our teams in a different way. So with that, I want to introduce my counterpart here in crime and my friend Anna Rasmussen from the UK. She's joining us from Western Europe, and in light of everything going on in Eastern Europe, thank you for still joining us. But Anna, I'd like you to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background, and let's kind of jump into some of this conversation.
Okay, brilliant. I love being described as a partner in crime. This is good. So hi, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you guys this morning for you and this afternoon for me. So as Steve said, my name is Anna Rasmussen. I am the founder and CEO of an organisation called Open Blend, where Steve and I are true partners. Open Blend is a platform that addresses retention and motivation through ensuring that people are having effective coaching-led one-to-ones. So my background is coaching. I've been a leadership development coach for 15, 16 years. Before my time in Open Blend, I used to go into lots of different types of organizations and train groups of people managers how to use coaching to drive the performance, how to use coaching techniques to drive the performance of the people that work in their teams. And about sort of 10 years ago, I recognized that the conversation didn't just need to be effective, but the breadth of topics that people needed to talk about needed to broaden as the world of work was evolving. So I put all of my ideas, I don't have a software background at all, but I put all of my ideas into a piece of software. And this is where I find myself today as the founder and CEO of a software platform.
So let's go to the beginning of the conversation, Anna, that you and I have been having, and why we created this live event in the first place. And then I want to hear from some of the members that are here. What's really going on? So everybody's talking about the Great Resignation, the lack of performance, people are leaving. What's happening from your perspective and your background? And we've talked about this. What's one of the roots to what's happening today?
I kind of agree and disagree with what you were as what you were saying before. I think COVID has accelerated a movement that was taking place anyway. So it's not because of it; it's just accelerated that process. So, but I think that employees, their expectations from what they want and need from an organization, from a manager specifically, have just shifted. And I think that there's a disconnect between the expectations of an employee and where organizations are. And I think those two coming together is creating this void, which is this Great Resignation. I mean, the stats are scary. I did some research yesterday, and 1 in 4 people that say part of this Great Resignation, 1 in 4 people have left. So that's 25%. And based on some research that's just been done by HR Magazine in conjunction with Slack, is that in 2022, a further 29% of people are expected to move jobs. So I mean, obviously that varies in different sectors, but it's set to get worse than it has been.
So let's delve in a little deeper on the whole idea of those expectations that are no longer aligned. Were they ever really aligned in the first place? Were there always some of those challenges existing before?
Yeah, no, I don't think they ever were aligned. I just think that employees had a higher tolerance level for what they would put up with, or what was the norm. You know, we're really challenging cultural norm, really. Sort of, you know, the way that businesses are set up and processes are set up, and you know, I work with people teams, HR teams every day of the week, and they're under an extreme amount of pressure to modernize everything, bring everything up to speed. So, you know, is it pay? Is it other benefits? Is it work environment? Is it office location? Is it, you know, the interior? So, you know, they're responding as quickly as they can. But I think the situation with COVID and the fact that everybody, what do they say? Is that, you know, right at the beginning, I love that expression. It was the biggest work at home experiment, you know, ever. But it worked really well, right? And everybody all of a sudden like experienced this freedom, this flexibility. They were saving money on a commute. They had much better work-life balance. They kind of got a bit of a, once they got over the sort of, you know, obviously there are some negatives to it, but I think people have recognized there's a lot of positives to it. And that's just shifted again the way that what people expect from work and where work fits into the bigger picture, and their purpose. And and I just think that it's just giving people a lot more time to reflect on what's really important.
So what do we do as leaders? And again, you and I have talked about this quite a bit. From an HR perspective, leaders, the coaching background that you have, all of these things, how do we start to look at solving for the problem, not just addressing the symptoms, right? Because I hear this all the time. Hey, I just need to hire more people because they're walking out the door. And my conversation is always, well, what are you doing to keep people? How do we engage more of our people? Because if we don't do that, we're bringing them in the front door, they're running out the back door. So that's addressing a symptom. How do we begin, from your perspective, Anna, really focusing on the root cause, given the complexity now of what's going on, some people working from home, some not, and all of those other things that you already mentioned?
It's a big question, that. You know, I think it, like with anything, that the linchpin in this is the people manager, is the manager of those individuals. They're the ones that, we spend again a lot of time in organizations talking about strategy and initiatives, but actually their strategy and initiatives, how does that get filtered down and supported by the manager with that individual on a micro and individualized level? And I think that has to be the place that you have to start to solve the symptom, has to be by acknowledging that one size doesn't fit all, and giving the manager the tools and the confidence and the structure and the headroom, and to understand that every single person that reports into them is different, and will need to be, as human beings are, which is quite right. It's we don't all want to be treated the same. So understanding what drives those individuals, understanding what's important to those individuals, communicating with them in a way that makes sense to them. So and then you can start, because actually, and then it's one thing the manager having the conversation, but it's then the manager then feeding that information back up into the organization and say, why is this individual leaving? Where is this individual dissatisfied? And that can then support the organization strategically on what they need to be doing, what messaging they need to be putting out, what their employee value proposition needs to look like. Because I completely agree with you, that leaky bucket, that it makes absolutely no sense. And I don't know if people are, I was talking to a group of people yesterday who were saying this is a boardroom issue now. This isn't an issue that is sitting within people teams and HR teams. The Great Resignation is at the board table, and people, that this is an issue that people are. So just to give you an example, I met but probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I went in to meet a CEO of an advertising agency in London. Spoke to her about Open Blend. It didn't go anywhere at that point. I got a WhatsApp from her about 3 weeks ago. She's gone to another company now as a CEO of another company, and she's like, I need you to help me, because I'm constantly dealing with people leaving, buyback situations, all this kind of situation that's going on, and CEOs are reaching out, looking for help. So it's it's a burning platform in organizations, but I guess it's easier the smaller the organization, to kind of get that two-way communication going, hearing what's going on. But but to answer your question, to start treating the cause of this, it's a lot, along with a lot of other issues, sits with the manager.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been talking about in a lot of the leadership development and other training that I've been doing is that leadership management is actually an individual sport first, a team sport second. And if we don't, that coincides with what you were just talking about, Anna, is engaging with that person one-on-one. But I want you to take that further. And one of the things that we've talked about with whoever's watching is we'll give them some practical things and some approaches that have worked well for you in your experience. And I'll chime in on some of the things that have worked well for me in my experience. But it's one thing to talk about this engagement and listening and so on. But if you were to lay out some steps, some things that as leaders we all should be doing, because I agree with you, it's a board issue, and I would think anybody who's watching this on video right now would probably agree with that this is beyond just the head of people or the head of talent or anything along those lines. If we don't have the right people that want to be with us, we're not going to be able to serve our customers, and eventually our businesses falter. So if you start kind of taking it into practical steps, Anna, what does that look like from your perspective?
Well, it's like anything. If based on what we've just been talking about here, that COVID has accelerated how organizations have evolved and how they need to work with their people, how they need to get the best out of people. The Great Resignation, people are leaving because they're not happy, they're not motivated. So therefore, significant processes need to change in an organization. So the first thing, and I know Steve and I, we're on exactly the same page with this. If you find yourself in a different working environment with the expectations of your employees are different, everything's different, then you can't carry on doing the same things internally. So an awful lot of organizations have performance management processes where at the beginning of a year, they put their objectives into a piece of software or a spreadsheet.
At best.
or on a piece of paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they might, if you're lucky, you check in on that in 6 months time. And then if you if not, the end of the year, and then you might get a bonus paid out in the end of the year. If that's the process and the structure in an organization, then that's going to be what managers think is okay to do. Like, they're the check-in points that you need to have. So the number one thing that needs to happen are these regular, frequent one-to-ones. I've actually got some stats. I'm going to read these off because this is a Harvard Business Review. I just got it yesterday. It just came out yesterday. The consultancy OC Tanner did a piece of research, and they're saying, and this is really interesting, weekly one-to-ones. So weekly one-to-ones between a manager and a direct report in uncertain times. So I think this is a really interesting, the piece of research was done in uncertain times, which we're absolutely in.
Yeah.
So weekly one-to-ones in uncertain times lead to a 54% increase in engagement, a 31% increase in productivity, 15% decrease in burnout, and 16% decrease in depression. Now, I haven't had a chance yet to look into this research, but just from having weekly one-to-ones, that's the impact that it has. I mean, if you halve those stats or quarter those stats, then people are less likely to walk out the door, right? Because that's why there will be the main reasons why people are going. So the main solution is, don't think that sitting down once a year, twice a year, even 3 times a year is going to solve any issue. These are regular weekly conversations. So frequency is one aspect of it. The second aspect of it has got to be what you're talking about. So the breadth of conversation.
Yeah.
So the topics that you are discussing. So now, actually, we did a piece of research during COVID, and it came out that one of the most prominent performance enablers was a really, really clear clarity and transparency about what needs to be delivered. And it's really interesting because when you're in an office, or as it all was before, you could see each other, you had that close proximity, and you didn't need to set things up. So something that came out as being really important is just complete clarity on what needs to be delivered, when it needs to be delivered, and what support you need in order to deliver that. And then checking in on that regularly. So taking objectives from annual or 6 monthly to monthly, maybe changing them from objectives to priorities, changing the language around it. What should we be focused on now?
It's interesting when you talk about frequency, because I mean, most people that are probably watching this, whether not here or live streaming, are saying, I can't meet, if I'm a leader, I can't, or if I'm not, I can't expect my leaders to take the time to meet with their team members every week. Are you crazy, Anna? I just can't do that. And it's interesting because during the heart of COVID, I'll use myself as the example. I was really good about meeting with all of my team members on a really consistent basis, updating once a week. Here's what's happening as a result of this new mandate. Here's what's happening. And I didn't realize until I looked at it, because as things settled down and I began to take that further, and then it went to 2 weeks, and then it went to 3 weeks, and then it went to 4 weeks, it changed. It changed the relationship with the team. It changed what we got accomplished with the team. I mean, it was really interesting. And I was one of the ones that said, Anna, I mean, I didn't say it to you, but in thinking of it to myself, I can't do this once a week. I have too many other responsibilities. But what I found is when I spread those out too far, it actually creates more challenges because of the inconsistency, the non-clarity around clarity of what needs to be done, and so on. But I mean, that is a challenge for some people to think through around that frequency, even though the data supports it.
Yeah, and there are realities that you have to take into consideration. So the size of a team, how many direct reports does a manager have? So I think what's the optimum is 6 or 7, or maximum is 6 or 7, and optimum is around 5. So I've got 6 direct reports, and I sit down fortnightly with my team. So we have a one-to-one fortnightly, but we're always checking in throughout the week. But those conversations don't need to be really long. So I have an hour every fortnightly with my team, but you could have a 10-minute check-in, and that brings me on to the 10-minute one-to-one, and that brings me on to another point, something that I think is really important in those conversations. And so I've got a bit of a bugbear about it, but managers sit down and have one-to-ones and think they're their one-to-ones. These should be pretty easy meetings for managers, because the agenda should be owned by the employee.
Yeah.
What does the employee need to talk about in order? It's not saying that the manager can't add to that agenda, but what does that employee want to talk about? So now when I sit down with my direct reports, it's their agenda. So what are the things? We've got an hour. What are the things that you want to talk about? And then we talk about it. And if there's one particular thing that maybe I want to bring up, I'll pop that on the agenda as well. But they lead it. And I think that's absolutely crucial. How would the manager know what the employee needs to talk about in order for them to progress, be motivated, be happy, be, solving the right issues, be supported in the right way?
So that's kind of a reverse of, I think, in general, what is taught. And here's why I say that. I watched a YouTube video yesterday on one of these leadership gurus, and he was talking about engaging during the one-on-one, and in his mind, it was monthly or quarterly. But he laid out, this is the agenda, and the majority of the agenda was what the leader wants to address with the team member. Yeah. Now what you're saying is in complete opposite. Where does that come from?
Where does it come from?
Yeah. Why do you say that that's the approach to take when everyone else or many others are saying it should be the other way? I happen to agree with you.
Yeah. I think look, I'm a coach. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not conditioned, but I truly deeply understand that no two people are the same. So if you take my team, for example, I've got 6 people in my team. If I sit down and have the same conversation with each of those people, what kind of impact is that going to have?
Yeah,
it's going to be boring. And I was taught this years and years ago. If you find something boring, then the other person is also finding that boring, right? That's a kind of a rule of thumb. Yeah. A rule of thumb. So if a manager is sitting down finding this one-to-one boring, then so is the employee. And that's when managers think, I can't find the time to have these one-to-ones because they're boring. They're not productive. I don't get anything out of them. Whereas I'm genuinely curious about what people want to talk about, where they need the support, and it just makes sure. And that comes on to. So I think I had three strains of the solution. So one is frequency, and I just to say that it could be monthly, it could be ad hoc. It doesn't matter, but frequently. If you go to the gym once, you're not going to get any biceps. If you go to the gym regularly, then you're going to, get stacked. So, which one do you want? If you're going to do it, do it consistently so you get it. Second one is the breadth of conversation that you're having, which we'll come back to. But the third one is the effectiveness of that conversation, and the agenda setting sits in the effectiveness of it. Within effectiveness, you also need to ensure that, and this is the coach in me as well, but you need to ensure that the conversation, that as you're coming out of that conversation, there's an outcome. So there's some action. So there's some things to do out of it. So it's not just a conversation that you're having and then you walk off, there's nothing to action, then you come back again. Again, we're talking about driving performance within the Great Resignation. So people now have got different expectations. They want to grow. They want to be engaged. They want to be motivated. They want to know their managers care. So we sit down, we have a good conversation about what you want to talk about, structured in such a way that it results in action. Somebody has the owner for that action, then you come back and you review it. So there's a consistency going through. Then people are engaged in the process and also they're talking about the things they want to talk about, which is key.
So let's address that one for a second again, talking about things that people want to talk about. What if they're afraid to talk about it? How do you start to go through this process to get to a point where the team member is actually willing to ask questions or talk about specific items that matter when they may have been afraid because you got to start somewhere. And if I've never done that with somebody before, they're probably not going to be completely honest about what they want to talk about from the get-go.
Well, so that kind of comes onto the breadth of conversation. So, obviously Open Blend is a piece of software that puts subject matters, that makes this very easy, but you don't need Open Blend in order to do this. You just need to think about breadth. So, so in a conversation, what motivates each individual? Do you know what's important to everyone that works for you? So do you know what their ambitions are, where they want to be in 6 months' time, where they want to be in 12 months' time? Do you know what their optimum state of well-being is. I've got someone in my team who thrives off quite a lot of stress. If I had other people in my team on that level of stress, that wouldn't be good for them. They would be unproductive because of it. So talk about stress levels with them. So how are you feeling about it? So ask them questions. So what drives them, what gets them out of bed in the morning, where they want to be, their headspace, how they're feeling about that. But to be honest, if people are uncomfortable, start talking about objectives and things that need to be delivered, breaking down those objectives, what and where they need support on that. I think any shift in relationship is going to, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take time. You need to build the rapport, build the trust, get that conversation going. It works both ways. So,
That's kind of where I was going with when, the process doesn't work if there's not a relationship there initially with the leader and their team member to actually make it work. There's got to be some trust there. So we've got to work on developing that trust first. And then this is that natural extension to help get the best for them, not just the best from them. And as you talk about what drives and motivates people, one of the things that I didn't quite get until you and I had some conversations some time ago was really that truly means everything and anything that motivates somebody. And I'll give you an example of that, again, kind of using myself. One of our newer team members, I had him go through. I use the software because it's easier for me. And that's the whole point behind it. It doesn't. I can do and not have to think as much. But when we looked at her open blend, and it was all what's important to her, Anna, were all business related. 100% of them, 8 out of 8 were business related. And what I realized is that, it's not the business side of somebody that shows up for work. It's the whole person, whether you're showing up for work at home or showing up for work in the office. So understanding what drives them in all areas and creating the relationship to kind of go back and let's not just talk about what drives you at work. Let's talk about what drives you in life. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're human beings, and I think sometimes we overcomplicate or overthink the relationship between a manager and an employee. These are 2 human beings, right? One of them is responsible for supporting the other one to thrive. How can you consider supporting someone to thrive if you don't know what makes them tick? You couldn't get an athlete, stand them at the starting line, fire the pistol and say, right, run that 100 meters in this best time. You need to understand why they want to do that. And then you need to create a training plan that's suitable for them and their height and weight and diet and everything that's going to get them to achieve that best time. And that's the role of a manager. And I think, we spoke about this yesterday, Steve. The role of the manager has changed hugely now. Yeah. And that, as you said there, building that trust and that rapport. Yeah, okay, if you overthink it, yes, it's complicated, but they're 2 human beings. So I think, if you're a manager, you should be able to say what motivates you, what makes you tick, what do we need to tap into to get the best out of you here? Like, you're an asset, and I'm here to support you. What do we need to tap into to do that? But managers need confidence in. They need to be supported. So I think another thing, going back to your original question, the solution is ensuring managers are confident. I mean, I've trained hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people managers. And I would say 99% of the managers that I've trained have got really good intent. They're not bad managers because they're ill-intended. Yeah. They've got good intent. They just don't have the confidence or the structure in order to have the right kind of conversations. And also they're kind of reinvent, because their managers probably treated them very differently. So they're having to kind of reinvent the wheel for this generation.
They're often taught the process of managing, not the leadership around people. They're 2 very, very different things. You're talking about blending the 2.
Yeah.
Into a certain extent.
Yeah. And relying on not having the answer, being comfortable not having the answers. I think that's a coaching mindset as well. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't just need to engage in a conversation where I know the answers. I need to engage in a conversation because I'm a human being and I'm curious and I care about you. And I want to make sure that I've got your back in order for you to support, for you to perform.
So let's go a little bit deeper, because we talk about frequency, and I think that's self-explanatory, whether it's every week, every month. It's every other week. It's constant. fortnight, as you would say. It's consistent, it's
You don't say
frequent, right? We don't say that here, but
All right.
I think we all get it. I mean, and then the breadth of topic and the effectiveness you were talking about in terms of action steps that come out of this one-on-one. Again, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second, so you can help explain this a little bit better. Is that if I'm the leader, I'm thinking, I don't need any more work. Tell me more. Right. So we're making assumptions. I would be making an assumption that I have more work to do as a leader as a result of this. But what are you really talking about in terms of the strategy of action at the end of each one of these more frequent meetings?
So if I may, I'll relate this back to how we onboard Open Blend when we go into organisations, because we go in to, so we work with Dot Martens globally, Gymshark globally, Aer Lingus, trying to think of all our global brands, Travelport, where you've got big populations of managers that we need to ensure they understand what's in it for them. So why would I bother? Why am I going to sit down and have these one-to-ones? So we spend a lot of time looking at the persona of the manager. What does the manager want? So for a manager to be successful, what needs to happen?
Yeah.
Okay. So they need to retain really good people. They need to have a team of people that are really motivated and buzzing. They need to have a team of people that are, the output is they're hitting all their targets and they're hitting their targets, they're productive, overachieving, they're recognized across the organization as a high performing team. You know, you only need to start kind of talking about these things for a manager to think, all right, well, I can get all of that if I'm having these regular conversations. So I think stripping it back to the basics. So you do sometimes get really high performing teams where the managers aren't sitting down and having them. They become quite tricky conversations because they have got high performing teams anyway, and they might not be sitting down. But but the chances are they've got really good rapport, trust conversations going on within those teams anyway. But they might not be as structured. They might just be a bit more informal. But yeah, we always talk about managers. We always start with the why, what's in it for me, and thinking about what, as a manager, what are their desired outputs. So, I mean, this is why OKRs have become, becoming, popular, because they're a way of saying, right, this is what the organization needs to achieve. This is what the teams need to achieve in order for the organization to achieve that. And then this is what the individuals need to achieve for the team to achieve, for the company to achieve. So in a way, it breaks it all down for the individuals and the managers to see what needs to be done. And it's all measured. So if you know as a manager that you need to get this team performing, I mean, I'm sitting in there, there's 25 people in Open Blend. I can see the high performing teams, and what's going on in those teams. But managers want to be recognised for that. They want their teams to be the high performing teams.
Sure.
So I would start there, just with the basics, going back to the job description of a manager, what they're there to do. Yeah.
But the other aspect of the work, the things that come out of those one-on-one meetings, those aren't really necessarily tasks for the leader to do. Those are primarily for the individual to accomplish, to achieve what they need to achieve. It's not, hey, the manager needs to do these 8 things for the individual.
No.
It's the manager having the discussion and asking the right questions, which I'd like you to drill in on a little bit, because I don't think everybody understands that, in order to get that individual to determine what they need to do next to take the next step in whatever area is most important to them.
And that actually is a very important point about why I think a typical manager might go, well, I don't have time to sit down and have these one-to-ones on a fortnight, on a weekly or 2 weekly basis. So, but that's because they are maybe conditioned to think that they're going to have those sessions and then come out with a massive long list of things to do.
Right.
That conversation has not been effective if the manager is coming out with the task list. The conversation is effective when the employee is coming out with it. So again, in Open Blend, we're lucky because we collect all the data. So we know across all of our clients, 86% of the actions that are put into Open Blend that come off the back of conversations are owned by the employee. Now, as a coach, that makes me so happy, because because that's how it should be. That it should be the employee that is owning those actions. So, yes, thank you for raising that. That's really key. An effective conversation, the individual owns the outcome and the action in order to do that. But it's the manager's responsibility to ensure the next session's booked in so they can review them.
Right.
And say, well done, you've achieved that. That's been done.
A bit of the accountability that comes with leading a person in the first place. You're not doing the work for them, but you're going to ask them questions. Did they achieve it? What did they learn from achieving it? Why did they not achieve it? What did they learn from not achieving it? And what are the next steps moving forward from there?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So go back to the drivers of people. And so let's again kind of put it in the context, right? Number one, frequency. Number two is understanding the individual, the breadth of the conversation. In the open blend system, I refer to elements because that's what you do. It's the 8 things or 7 things or 6 things that truly drives somebody. But here's one of the key pieces that I learned from this. And I shared this with you yesterday, right? When somebody says, you ask one of your team members, think about this. I'm sure you've all had this happen. What drives you? And they say, career advancement drives me. Where does your mind go? So think about how you define for yourself career advancement. And Jessica, I know you've heard me say this before, so this won't be new to you. But let's think about it. If you were to all say this is how I define it, it's probably a little bit different for each of us. So a number of years ago, I had a COO, head of HR, that moved into a COO role for me. And she came to me after being here for 7 years and said, hey, I'm going to quit. And I said, well, why are you going to leave? And she said, well, career advancement. And I took that as she wants to do all the things that I do, right? I'm the CEO of the business. So I start pouring on all of these other things that to me would be career advancement because of the perspective that I come from. 3 months later, she comes back to me and she still resigns. And I said, why are you resigning? And she said, career advancement. I said, well, what are you talking about? I've done all these things. And she said, Steve, your definition of career advancement and mine are different. And one of the things that I've really appreciated, and you asked me yesterday, Anna, did I save her or lose her? I lost her, right? Incredibly important. And there was more to it than that, but that was one of the keys. And one of the things that I appreciate about the structure behind even what you do in open blend, and again, you don't need it, but to do it with it, but you can do without it. But it's having that person who selects those things important to them, define what it means. So as a leader, I don't make the wrong assumption about what career advancement, family time, or a host of other things means to the individual. I actually get it from them directly. That seemed to be a really, really important piece to the whole structure behind what you're talking about.
Yeah, shall I explain for those that are listening and are on the call? I'll explain what this is. So it's based on the wheel of anything, which is literally a wheel broken into pieces. So it looks like a sort of like a pizza, and it's a coaching framework that is very well known. So it's called the wheel of anything, and we use it in open blend to collect an individual's motivational drivers. So an individual will go in at the beginning and will identify. So it depends on the organization. You have it as settings, but you can have between 4 and 8 drivers. So let's say 6. So a company has, so an individual goes in and they need to choose 6 drivers from a menu of 28. So the things that are really important and the things that need to be fulfilled in order for them to perform at the best of their ability. Now, to give you an idea what these drivers are, so you could have effective team, career advancement, recognition, fun, health and exercise, time with my kids, fulfillment at work, money. So there's a number of different things. There's 28 of them. And then they choose the 6 that are most important to them. So that's a really great process for a lot of people, because for a lot of people, they don't know the 6 most important things to them. So if they don't know them, then how's their manager going to extract that from them anyway, right?
Well, you know what, when I went through it for the first time, I've done goal planning for years and years and years, but I had never really put it in the exact same format to say, and I used 8. These are the 8 things that are critically the most important to me. And how do I define? I had never done it before.
Yeah. So once you've chosen them, you then have to redefine them. And this is to Steve's point, and this is actually a bit of an eye-opening moment for managers, because you take them through what this is, and they think, well, I know that person's motivated by career advancement. But actually, then when they see the definitions, they're like, "Oh, right, maybe I don't know that person as well." So there's a help, there's a sort of a help there. So then they define what it means to them, and then they score their current level of fulfillment in that against that motivator, and then they score where they need it to be. So it creates a gap. And then in the one-to-ones, if they want to talk about one of those drivers, they pull that into the agenda, and then they sit down and they talk about it. So as we're talking about the great resignation, let's use the example of Steve's employee from a few years ago, who was the COO. That whole situation would be avoided, and I wonder whether or not she'd still be with you, because you'd know that career advancement was important to her, you'd know what the definition was, you know how fulfilled she is against it now, and you'd know where she wanted to get to, and then you'd have a structured conversation. And if she wanted to talk about it, she put it on her agenda. So then you got it on the agenda, and then you're having a conversation on what needs to happen to close the gap in order to get there. So, if that's why she left, and this whole topic is about the great resignation,
yep,
then, that's a really important aspect of what needs to feed into these one-to-one conversations.
And that goes back to how you opened. I mean, let's face it, there's this misalignment between our team members and our leaders. And unless you go through that process to understand each of your team members, there will always be some level of misalignment, will there not?
Yeah. Yes. But my job is so hard. I'm the first to admit I'm not that organized, but I have a dashboard in Open Blend with everyone in my team, and what their motivators are, where their well-being is, what objectives they've got live, how many actions they've got live, if those actions are behind. So I can just go and look in one place to see the general status of everything that's going on in the team, and they're all different. Yeah.
So now we've got the second piece, which you've explained really well, is understanding what's driving them and so on. But now there's the actual conversation, and I get the agenda where the employee brings the topic they want to talk about. But as the leader, how do I know how to have that conversation? I get that the individual is going to bring something to me to talk about. But what do I do with that? And how does that result at the end with that action item that we were talking about, that is really the action item for the individual, not for us as the leader?
Well, I think coaching frameworks. So for qualified coaches, you call it like a toolbox. So you've got loads of different coaching frameworks that sit there that help you open up conversation and have those conversations. And some of those tools in that toolkit have come through into much more mainstream. So the wheel of anything, I don't know, the wheel that's broken in, that's pretty mainstream, and lots of people use that. The other one is the GROW model.
Yeah.
And we use the GROW model in the tool. So you can use this on paper, or however you want to do it, but it's to structure a conversation in a certain way that you start with the goal. Now it sounds insane that so often a conversation would start with the problem, so the reality, and this is right, I'm come to you, this is the problem, help me solve this problem, and then you engage in this huge great conversation, but you don't actually know where you're going. So the GROW model, once people use it on a regular basis and it just becomes a learned behavior, is such a brilliant way to structure any conversation, whether it be employees, kids, husbands, whatever you want to be, right? So
wives, come on, let's be fair.
Wives, sorry, wives. Partners, whatever, yeah.
Sure.
Sorry, I was just being very selfish there. So the goal. So where is it that you want to get to? And really explore that. And where is it now that you are now? So you got a difference. So I really like the when I first got taught the GROW model. So when you're talking to someone about where they want to be, you'll often, if you're doing it well, you'll see someone's body language. They'll be kind of talking like this, and this is where I want to get to, and they're like really excited about where they're headed to. And then you say, right, now let's talk about where you are, and then they slump down like this because there's a shift in kind of the mindset from the goal. But this is good. I mean, then you're having a good conversation. So where is it you want to get to? Where are you now? What are the options to get there? And that's where I think managers can really step in as well, because once you know where they want to get to and where they currently are, then you need to ask them what support they need. What are the options to get you to where you want to? How can I help? How can other people in the business help? What other support network have you got? What do you need to learn? Do you need to go on a training and development course? Do you need to, in the example of a career advancement, what options have you got to get there? What support do you need in order to get there? And then that's when it becomes really individual to that person. And then so you've got the GRO, and then the W is the way forward, and that's where you commit to action. So what is it now? We've had this great conversation. What is it we're going to do, and how are we going to move forward? And you can use a GROW model on stress, a driver that somebody has. So you can use it on a particular objective that someone needs to deliver against. You can use it on feedback of a piece of feedback. So 360 feedback, you can use it in there. And it's just a really powerful tool to have in your back pocket, particularly if it's more of a challenging conversation. So, let's just let's just stop. Let's focus on where you want to get to.
And I think that's the key, because the intention of most leaders and managers is when somebody brings a problem to us, we just want to solve the problem. Yeah. One, we'll tell you how to solve it. And two, we may not even know what you're trying to solve for, because we don't know where you're going in the first place and what your individual goal is. The thing that I've appreciated about being able to do this within the Open Blend platform is the suggestion of questions. If I wasn't versed, if I didn't really understand, I don't want to keep asking the same question, same scenario over and over and over to the individual. It gives recommendations on how to ask questions. What would it look like if you achieve this goal? How would you feel if you didn't achieve this goal? Just to really get a sense of where the person is. And it's for some people, they get a little freaked out. Well, you're getting a little bit too personal. No, you're just helping them become who they want to be based on the objectives that they have for themselves, whether they be 6 or 8. And that individual ultimately appreciates the fact that we're doing that with them. And you can see that in their additional performance on the work side as well. So it's not just figuring out a way to get the most out of our people. My opinion of this is, let's get the most for our people. And the byproduct of that is that they tend to come to work more satisfied. They tend to be more engaged. We don't have the great resignation like we are now. Performance of our business increases. That's how I see this cycle actually working.
Yeah. And I think also, if you have a culture where you're acknowledging that people bring their full selves to work, which I think we're in agreement that COVID's accelerated that hugely, is that's an attraction tool as well. So all of our customers use the fact that they have these sort of broader conversations as part of their employee value proposition. So if there's this war on, so with the Great Resignation comes a war on talent, right? So you've got all these competing. So if you say you've got a 28-year-old advertising executive in central London, and they've got this, everyone's hiring. Everyone's hiring. So they're in Saatchi, they're in Mediacom, they're in all these different agencies. Why are they going to want to go to one over the other if they're all working with amazing clients, they're all central London based, whatever. Look, if you come here, this is how we work with you. This is how we understand you. This is how we support you to reach your potential. This is the culture. These are the kind of one-to-ones you're going to be having. And I think sometimes businesses, it's funny because I'm talking to kind of C-suite all the time, but I'm really representing the individual, the employee through the product. So I feel like I'm in quite a privileged position to see the whole thing. And I think sometimes organizations need to stand in the shoes of an employee. And you're standing, you've just got off the tube at Oxford Circus, and you can see all these agencies are within kind of 5-minute walk from you. Which one are you going to walk to? So what makes that appealing for me? And then when I get there, why am I going to stay there? Why am I going to work really hard and work extra long hours for this organization? Because they treat me well. So I think sometimes it's kind of stripping it back and standing in the shoes of the employees. And why would I stay here?
Yeah, we talk a lot about putting people at the center of business, right? That's what you're in essence doing through the platform or through the process. Again, not through the platform. The platform just helps us do it, is putting people at the center. You put people at the center. We have the performance issue taken care of. So we get results for the organization. We potentially lower turnover, which is what we're trying to do in the Great Resignation. There's a greater allegiance to the leader because we think they care about us and they have to do this intentionally. They understand what drives us. We're achieving things both personally and professionally with the support of our leader. All of that is done within the framework of of Open Blend. And from what I understand, from what I've seen, Anna, it's really and I don't want to do an overall sales pitch for Open Blend, but let's think about it. I haven't seen another tool that does all of the pieces from the corporate goals, the individual goals, who the person wants to be, and the coaching to help that person happen in one tool. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a fan of Open Blend, but no, but I think it's like any. It's there to solve a problem, and it's there to facilitate something that actually should be happening anyway. These conversations should be happening. If you are in a management role, leadership role, I think you call it, then you are responsible for not looking after, that's the wrong word, but you're responsible for supporting people to reach their full potential and thrive in the work environment, and that is changed. So that it needs to be much more holistic, much more considered, much more people led, and we've got a bit of a slogan, what's good for people is good for business.
Agreed.
Think about the person first. We've just written, actually, it's quite interesting because we do quite a lot of stuff with retail. We've just written a blog on our website about so when you're in, actually it's the same for hospitality, because we do a bit in hospitality. So in retail and hospitality, you think a lot about the customer experience, but the customer experience is a direct result of the employee experience.
Agreed.
So don't be focused on this. That will take care of itself. Focus on the employee first. And I think what's happening now is fantastic, because it's pushing the movement along. You think about your people first.
What you just described is thinking about the customer experience first is dealing with the symptom. The customer is not happy because the team is not delivering. In most cases, is where it starts from. You can't force the employee to take care of the customer. You can't do that. You can force you. So there's a saying that I have is, we should hold it. You can assign responsibility, and you should. You can assign accountability, and you should. But you can't assign ownership. You have to create an environment where people choose to take it. This is exactly what you're talking about. Become people-centric in this way, and they'll determine themselves that they need to do that. Your customer's taken care of, your business performs, more people stay. You've got a winning team to be able to do that. But the cool thing is I think you've given some tactical things for everybody to be able to do. The frequency of the meetings, the content within the conversation, the action items and the grow method are all things I think we all kind of know, but very few people bring it together. So they can go off and do it on their own. The beauty of Open Blend is that it gives you a platform to tie performance, both company and individual, into all of that, into one platform that actually makes it much easier and much more effective, in my opinion. Is that? Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, we're not the silver bullet at all.
No.
Open Blend is there to facilitate an evolution of a culture that's led by the employees. So and you can do, if you can have training courses where you're focused on with the manager leader population, where you're talking about exactly as you said, frequency. Recognize that everyone is different, and depending on how big your team is, and but commit to something and do that, and do it regularly. Breadth of conversation. What do you think is appropriate to talk about in those conversations? And then effectiveness is around an agenda, coaching frameworks, asking questions, listening, making sure you've got actions where an individual's accountable, and then following up on that. And then you just pull those three things together just in your mind. I mean, the software makes it easier, but you can do that without it as well.
You can, but from an efficiency perspective, I mean, it just helps the entire process. But understanding what the process is key. If people want to get greater information about Open Blend, of course, they can go to qualigence.com. There's an entire section on Open Blend, also openblend.com. And one of the things we will be doing is providing an actual product demo. If somebody wants to be able to tie all this together using a tool, we didn't want to do that today. That's not the intent today. The intent was to understand the framework of what's in the tool, so that if you choose to do it on your own, you can. But if you do want some help with it in a cost-effective way, there is that opportunity. And we'll be providing some information so that you can view an actual demo of the product, how it works. You can reach out to myself directly. You can reach out to openblend.com directly as well. Any last kind of words on this, Anna, from your perspective?
No, just a pleasure to talk to you, as always.
It was good to have the conversation. I think it's something that everybody needs to hear in one way or another. People are at the center. This answers the question of how do we make people at the center. So with that, any questions from the remaining people that are here? I know we've got a lot more watching us live on Facebook and LinkedIn right now, which is sometimes it just happens.
I'd like to just chip in and just say, Anna, this is a great platform, a great solution. You know, it's no secret. It's all about it's an employee-driven market these days, right? They're looking at it as, you know, what's in it for us? What's in it for me? Am I heard? Is my input being valued and respected? What perks are there? And that whole people-centric approach is so important today. It's so necessary. And like Steve said, this is kind of a one-stop shop to be able to focus on that whole recruitment, performance, and retention pieces. So this is great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for those of you that are watching online. Anna, thank you for taking the time out to have the discussion with your coaching background. It was wonderful. And we'll provide some opportunities for follow-up for everybody. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great day. Bye.